Chairman, committee members, thank you for having us here today and for all the important work we've heard about today. I'm Jeff Clements, President of American Promise. We're a nationwide, cross-partisan organization of thousands of Americans in every single state pushing to help win this 28th Amendment to the United States Constitution. It would overturn the Citizens United decision, would enable we the people to get our government back by enacting sound and responsible and way overdue limits on spending in elections, on corporate and special interest funding in elections. We can't do that without an amendment. I do have written testimony. I have an additional white paper I'll submit if there would be of assistance on the question of corporations and constitutional rights. And I would just make a couple of points in my oral testimony. Number one, the situation is grave and urgent and amendment worthy. There are a few times in American history when we do constitutional amendments. They tend to be times like ours right now, disequilibrium, disruption, fragmentation, from the Revolutionary War to the post-Civil War to the last Gilded Age to the 1960s. That's when amendments happen. We're in an era where we need to do it too, because like those eras, the Supreme Court has diverged from what the Constitution means and what we the people need to do to govern ourselves. The best way to see that is the last election, as the next one will be, was the most expensive in American history. Since the Citizens United decision in 2010, close to $40 billion has been spent, and here's what makes it a constitutional crisis. Almost all that money came from corporations and less than 1% of the American people. We have lost control of our political system. Jim Leach, Republican from Iowa, on our advisory council, says we are not living in democracy right now, we're in a corporatist oligarchy. And that's a Republican from Iowa using words like that. We need this amendment. That's my first point. My second point is the amendment is more than a campaign finance issue. It's really the Constitution is the DNA. That quote of Jim Leach started with, the Supreme Court has genetically modified our democratic DNA, turning us into corporatism and oligarchy. We have to fix the DNA or we can't get the other reforms and other challenges this country faces. And so it's more than campaign finance. It's really a question of, are we equal citizens in a republic? Or is it a marketplace where if you have more money, you get to buy more representation? That decision is a question of, will we win this amendment, or will we not? Will we be equal citizens, or will we be consumers in a marketplace? We have to be equal citizens. We have to have this amendment. It's more than campaign finance also because as a lawyer who has represented some of the biggest corporations in the world over my 30 years of law practice, who served as chief of the Public Protection Bureau in the Attorney General's office here in Boston, I can tell you corporations have gotten the message. It's virtually legal malpractice not to try a bizarre and ridiculous constitutional claim to avoid having the laws apply to your corporation. That's why we see Exxon trying to block Attorney General Healy's investigation. It's why we see corporations even attacking minimum wage laws as violations of the Equal Protection Clause. We have to address this problem. And I can tell you, as an organization with many business people involved, professors of law who are professors of corporations law, businesses would welcome this amendment. This is not, this pay-to-play system is not good business. This amendment would be good business. Finally, I know I'm out of time. If I could just say the national context for this, Mr. Mineta mentioned the 5 states who have taken the route of pushing for a convention to move this forward. An additional 19 states have formally called for this 28th Amendment, as have 800 cities and towns. And when the people get a chance to vote, as they did in ballot initiatives in Washington State, California, Montana, Colorado, and many of those 800 cities and towns, virtually always the vote is around 75 to 85% in favor. This is a cross-partisan issue. This is not a progressive versus conservative. It's a cross-partisan issue. Americans desperately want this because we need it done if we're going to save our republic. So thank you so much.